So Meta's advertising revenue just went up, which sounds great, right? But their free cash flow completely collapsed. I mean, by 91%.
Yeah, that is a massive drop.
Right. And why? Because they are basically slamming this high-speed digital dream into a very low-speed physical reality.
Exactly.
And look, we aren't here today to debate if, artificial intelligence is a net good for humanity.
Right. Or if our energy policies are right or wrong. That's not the point.
No, not at all. We are here to look at the global plumbing, specifically why the pipes are starting to burst. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're looking at the underlying machinery of the global economy, and we are focusing heavily on what shifted for you to see during week 31 of 2026.
Which honestly requires looking way past the daily headlines. I mean, to really see that machinery, we have to view the world through two very distinct lenses.
Okay, let's lay those out.
The first is what our sources call the global pressure field, or MGF.
MGF.
Yeah, think of this as the abstract pressures, the resource constraints, and the massive speed mismatches building up across different sectors of the economy.
So it's like the invisible stress building up inside the pipes.
That is exactly it. And then the second lens is the transition gradient field, TGF.
TGF, okay. So if MGF is the pressure...
Right. If the pressure field is the stress in the pipes, this transition field is how the real world, like the corporations, the governments, daily operations, how they're actually changing their contracts, their physical infrastructure, and their rules to adapt to those bursting pipes.
So it's the visible change in the plumbing itself.
Exactly. It's what people actually do when the pressure gets too high.
And you can really see this if you look at the shift from week 30 to week 31. Because like last week, we had all these isolated headlines, right?
Yeah, totally scattered.
We saw massive AI capital expenditure, chip shortages, power grid limits, logistics risk, just separate problems. But this week, those exact isolated shortages morphed.
They did. They turned into lock-in long-term power generation contracts. The pressure crystallized.
Yeah, we suddenly saw grid-scale battery storage deals, massive structural changes in supply chains, new fiscal policies. I mean, it wasn't just talk anymore.
No, money actually moved. Concrete got poured.
Right. And what's wild is that the market fundamentally changed how it evaluates growth.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to that AI speed mismatch.
Oh, absolutely. The total dollar amount spent on AI is just, well, it's no longer the metric the market cares about.
Wait, really? Because it felt like for a long time, any company throwing billions at AI was just rewarded with a stock bump.
Oh, it was. It was this magical growth narrative. But the tolerance for that has completely vanished.
So what are they looking for now?
The market is now ruthlessly scrutinizing when and through which specific business models that massive capital expenditure can actually be recovered. They want to see the path to the money.
Okay, let's break down that meta statistic I opened with, because I think it perfectly illustrates this.
Oh.
You have Microsoft and Amazon on one side and Meta on the other. Right.
Amazon just raised its annual capital expenditure outlook to a staggering $220 billion.
Which is just a mind-boggling number.
It is, and the market basically cheered. They just accepted it.
Well, they accepted it because Amazon demonstrated an incredibly strong path to recovery through cloud demand.
Okay.
Yeah, Amazon is building the underlying infrastructure, right? The data centers, the servers, the stuff that everyone else has to rent to run their own AI models.
So the market can actually model that revenue. They see the toll booth on the highway.
Exactly. They know exactly how Amazon gets paid back. But Meta is in a totally different boat.
Because they are buying the same massive quantities of GPUs, right? The same server racks.
Yeah, but they aren't renting them out. They're using them internally to train models, mostly hoping those models eventually optimize their advertising algorithms enough to justify the cost.
Which means the time to revenue is vastly longer and just, well, much more abstract.
Precisely. So when their free cash flow drops by 91%, the market panics. It seems to me we are witnessing a new economic law of the AI era, honestly. Like, whoever controls the slowest physical bottleneck dictates the speed of the digital profits.
That is a brilliant way to frame it, actually. Because the software layer of AI, like the code, the algorithms, it scales almost instantly.
Right? You write it, you deploy it globally in seconds.
But the physical reality required to run that software moves at a glacial pace. I mean, you are talking about acquiring land, securing water rights for coolant.
Waiting 5 years for a local utility to upgrade a transmission line.
Exactly. And physically constructing giant concrete buildings.
It's basically like trying to upgrade a jet engine while the plane is in midair. The software is upgrading at Mach 2,
Hmm.
but the supply chain bringing the physical titanium parts is stuck in ground traffic.
And that speed difference creates a brutal financial friction. You get strong revenue growth on the digital side, sure, but severe punishing cash flow deterioration on the physical side.
So the AI market hasn't stopped growing by any means.
No, not at all. But it has entered a structural phase of natural selection. The system is brutally deciding who actually has the balance sheet to absorb the costs of maintaining that growth over a multi-year physical build-out.
Which I guess forces us to look past the data centers and straight at the hardware inside them. Because this massive capital burn isn't just about pouring concrete.
No, it's a desperate scramble for the physical silicon. The semiconductor market is undergoing a massive shift.
Yeah, the sources detail how chips are moving from being, open market commodities to reserve future capacity.
We can see the mechanics of this shift really clearly with SK Hynix. They posted a massive profit jump, entirely driven by AI memory demand.
It was a record quarter for them, right?
It was, but their stock price actually dropped.
Wait, they hit a record quarter and the stock went down?
Yeah, the market punished them because they missed slightly inflated forward-looking expectations.
Because the market is no longer just looking at raw production volume or trailing profits.
Right. They are looking at who controls the future of that production. You see this when you contrast SK Hynix with Samsung.
What did Samsung do differently?
Samsung came out and signaled that memory shortages could last all the way until 2028. But they didn't just warn the market, they restructured their entire sales model.
How so?
They shifted heavily toward long-term prepaid supply contracts that actually include explicit price floors.
Okay, let's look at the mechanics of a price floor in this context, because that feels like a radical shift.
It is. Samsung is essentially telling a major tech giant, look, we will build a new fabrication plant to meet your future demand, but you must guarantee to pay at least a specific price per chip for the next several years.
Even if the broader AI market crashes and spot prices plummet.
Exactly. Even if prices tank, you pay the floor.
Let me check that, make sure I have this straight. The massive demand for chips hasn't disappeared, its location has just changed.
Right.
So the massive tech giants are essentially acting as zero-interest banks, prepaying for chips to fund the factories.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
So greater stability for contracted buyers,
Yeah.
the Amazons and Microsofts who can actually afford those price floors. That actually means greater uncertainty, fewer available chips, and massive price spikes for smaller companies left outside those contracts.
You nailed it. The open spot market for high-end silicon is effectively dying.
Wow.
Semiconductors are no longer just commodities you buy when you need them. They have transitioned into reserved connection rights to future computing resources.
And those rights are being distributed based on pure capital power.
Purely. If you don't have the leverage to sign a multi-year prepaid contract with a price floor, you simply do not get access to the future of compute.
It's basically an enclosure of the market.
Mhm.
And it leaves the smaller players entirely exposed,
It does.
which perfectly sets up the next major shift.
Mm.
Because we've talked about the abstract financial pressure and the enclosure of hardware, but these pressures eventually crash into the physical world.
Yes, what the sources call the living membrane. The living membrane is just everyday life. It's your household costs, operational labor, municipal budgets, and the literal environment we live in.
And week 31 exposed how geopolitical, climate, and financial pressures are all hitting this living membrane at completely different speeds.
You see this speed mismatch perfectly in the Strait of Hormuz data.
Oh, right, the shipping lanes.
Yeah. The financial markets will reprice oil futures in milliseconds based on a single diplomatic headline or a skirmish.
That's right, the financial operating system reacts instantly.
But the physical reality of rerouting a massive oil tanker, that takes weeks.
Because you have to calculate new fuel burns, pay higher insurance premiums, negotiate new crew rotations.
And literally sail thousands of miles out of the way. It's incredibly slow.
And that disconnect between the fast financial operating system and slow physical time is exactly what we see happening with the climate data too, right? Particularly the European heat waves.
Yes, a heat wave creates a cascading failure. Obviously, it dramatically increases the demand for cooling across households and businesses.
Everyone turns their AC on at the same time.
Right. But simultaneously, that exact same heat actively reduces the efficiency of the power plants trying to meet that demand.
The mechanics of that are fascinating, and honestly, they're often ignored.
They really are.
Because gas turbines need cool ambient air to compress efficiently. And nuclear plants need cool river water to condense steam.
Exactly. When the air and rivers heat up, Generation capacity plummets right when you need it most.
So now drop the massive, unyielding 24/7 power demand of AI data centers into that exact same compromised grid.
It's a nightmare scenario for grid operators.
It's like a highway evacuation scenario. It doesn't matter if the local power grid has enough capacity on an annual average.
No, not at all.
If every single person tries to evacuate a city on the exact same 100-degree afternoon, the highway jams. It doesn't matter that the road will be completely empty in December. The system crashes at the peak moment of stress.
And this collision at the peak moment brings up what our sources call the silences.
The silences.
Yeah. When you listen to corporate earnings calls from the tech giants, they loudly trumpet their cloud revenue, their capital expenditure plans, and their chip acquisition strategies.
But they are completely silent on the localized, externalized costs.
Exactly.
Like a massive data center uses millions of gallons of local water for cooling. It forces the local municipality to upgrade their public power grid, often passing those infrastructure fees onto residential ratepayers.
Yep. And there is an exhausting amount of physical labor required just to maintain this infrastructure.
But the unified reporting on how this tech boom affects the local living membrane is just completely missing from the balance sheets.
It's entirely silent. Which
Yeah.
brings us to how the real world is actually adapting to these silent, cascading pressures.
Okay, this is the transition field stuff.
Right. We move from the abstract pressure field into the transition field. How is the plumbing actually being changed?
The sources outlined 4 distinct mechanisms of transition, right?
They do.
Let's walk through these because I think this is where the rubber meets the road for you listening. The first mechanism is genuine recovery.
Yes. Recovery.
This is a transition that actually increases the capacity of the entire system to handle pressure. And the prime example from week 31 is in Malawi.
Right. They installed a new 20-megawatt utility-scale battery storage system.
But what is critical to understand about this battery is that it doesn't just store power for a rainy day, right?
No, it adds what grid operators call resynchronization capacity.
Which means what exactly?
Well, the electrical grid has to maintain a very specific frequency, usually 50 or 60 hertz, kind of like a heartbeat.
Okay.
And solar power is highly volatile. If a dense cloud literally passes over a massive solar farm, generation drops instantly, and the grid's frequency dips.
Wait, literally just a cloud passing by.
Literally just a cloud. And if the frequency dips too far, the whole system trips and you get a massive blackout.
So the battery acts as a massive shock absorber. The cloud passes, the voltage drops, and the battery injects power in milliseconds to keep the frequency steady so the grid doesn't shut down.
Exactly. It's not just shifting a problem around. It is genuinely adding new structural integrity to the system.
That makes sense. That is a true recovery mechanism.
Contrast that with the second mechanism, which is containment. We actually just explored this with Samsung's semiconductor contracts.
Ah, right.
Containment doesn't increase the total supply of chips in the world. It takes the wild uncertainty of the open market and contains it within a rigid, multi-year legal framework.
So it builds a fortress for the few. It guarantees supply for the massive tech giants, but actively externalizes the risk of shortages and price spikes onto the smaller companies left outside the fortress walls.
Exactly. It contains the risk for some by dumping it on others, which leads to the third mechanism, displacement.
Displacement, okay.
This is where a system transitions not by solving a problem, but by geographically or legally just moving the burden.
Like what happened with the EPA?
Yes. In week 31, we saw a controversial interpretation by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA essentially suggested a pathway for data centers to build their own dedicated independent power sources.
Like massive natural gas or diesel generators.
Right, to bypass the public grid entirely and sidestep certain federal pollution caps.
Okay, we need to challenge the underlying logic of this for a second, because the argument is that by building their own behind-the-meter power plants, these data centers aren't straining the public grid, which protects everyday consumers from rolling blackouts or rate hikes.
That's the argument on paper, yes.
So on paper, it looks like a recovery mechanism for the public utility. But in reality, this is a direct, localized transfer of the burden.
It absolutely is. The data center gets the reliable power it needs to run its AI models. The public grid avoids a catastrophic overload.
But the local community surrounding that data center absorbs the displacement.
Yes. They get the noise pollution from the turbines, the localized exhaust emissions, and they often lose regulatory oversight over what is essentially a private utility operating right in their backyard.
So the pain isn't solved, it's just relocated.
Exactly. Which brings us to the final transition mechanism, Compensation.
Compensation.
This is when a system tries to maintain its current broken structure by temporarily softening the blow with money.
Like slapping a Band-Aid on it.
Pretty much. Italy faced massive protests over spiking fuel prices impacting the logistics sector, and the government's response was to authorize a temporary cut to the diesel tax.
It is a purely political Band-Aid.
Totally.
I mean, it stops the immediate protests and protects a household or business budget for a few weeks, but mechanistically, it fundamentally changes nothing.
Not a single thing.
It does not improve the fuel efficiency of the trucking fleet. It does not build out a more resilient rail network. It does not reduce the country's reliance on imported diesel.
It is an exception to the rule designed purely to buy time, but it builds no actual structural capacity.
So we have recovery, which adds capacity,
Right.
containment, which locks up resources for the powerful, displacement, which dumps the burden on the vulnerable, and compensation, which just prints money to ignore the problem.
That's the summary, yeah.
Looking at all four of these playing out simultaneously in week 31, a very clear, overarching theme emerges.
The reality is that the world did not solve its global pressures last week.
No.
The total load on the system, the massive demand for computing power, the strain on the electrical grids, the friction in physical logistics, none of that actually decreased.
Not by a single kilowatt.
Instead, what we witnessed was the global operating system relentlessly deciding who will carry that load.
Just shifting the weight.
Exactly. Through long-term price floors, through dedicated off-grid infrastructure, through targeted tax cuts, these high-stress conditions are quietly being woven into everyday, normal operations.
We aren't moving toward a resolution of the crisis.
Mhm.
We are constructing a new high-tension normal.
We are. And every single one of these new solutions will inevitably create new dependencies.
Right, like the tech giant hoarding chips creates a fragile supply chain for the rest of the economy.
Or the data center burning its own natural gas creates localized environmental debt. These actions create residual loads, and that sets the stage for the next wave of global pressure.
So the pressure field forces a transition in the physical plumbing.
Yes.
That transition creates a new, uneven landscape of winners and losers. And that new landscape generates the exact pressures that will define the next crisis.
It's a continuous feedback loop.
The plumbing is continuously rerouting the water, but the total water pressure never actually drops.
It doesn't.
And the vital skill for anyone watching this unfold is to look at where the water is being diverted, because it is almost never diverted equally.
We really have to move past the expectation of a clean resolution here.
Right.
The system isn't trying to blow up the asteroid, it's just building a bunker for the people who can afford the concrete.
That is a dark, but incredibly accurate way to put it. We started today looking at the speed mismatch of AI, where digital dreams are crashing into physical concrete and copper.
Yeah.
We watched the semiconductor market enclose itself, locking out the small players. We saw how climate heat waves are silently breaking the efficiency of the power grid right when demand peaks.
And we broke down the stark difference between genuinely recovering capacity and simply displacing the risk onto someone else's backyard.
Exactly. I want to leave you with a lingering thought, something for you to mull over long after this audio ends.
Let's hear it.
The next time you read a triumphant headline about a massive tech company securing a revolutionary new energy deal or signing a historic multi-billion-dollar supply contract, don't just applaud the innovation.
Look closer.
Ask yourself the mechanical question. Did the risk actually vanish from the system? Or did it just get quietly transferred to a local community, a smaller business, or a future generation whose balance sheet isn't public?
That's the real question.
Until next time, keep looking beneath the surface.